Yes, indeed, ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to yet another edition of The Story Behind the Story. I'm your host, Dr. H. Ruat. Yes, I know. I have been absent, but I have a fairly good excuse this time. I mean, I was under the knife. Yes, I'm sitting here with doing the show tonight with my damaged left leg propped up, circulating ice packs all through it, and a little bit of pain medication to get me through it. And I hope I don't say anything really crazy tonight and really nutty. I know sometimes we get off on some pretty exciting tangents, and I tell you folks, it's a pleasure to be back. It really truly is, to get back to some semblance of normalcy, at least in my crazy life. Yes, indeed, the matrix, the machine that we live in, folks. We've said this so many times over the years, and those of you listening, I surely do appreciate your feedback. I do appreciate both good and bad input, because that's how we learn. We invite skeptics. We invite people to come with honest questions without an agenda, because that's how we learn. Yes, indeed, folks, we appreciate the listening audience. We appreciate your support. Again, I apologize if I can't get to all the emails. I do get hundreds and hundreds of emails every day. I try to sort through them and go with what we can. And I understand that we live in a crazy, crazy world. Sometimes, you know, what you think is absolutely true, you think it's true because it's so ingrained. It's so part of our psyche, if you will, from the very moment we started going to public schools and education. But sometimes when you start to step outside that matrix, when you start to step outside of that box, if you will, and start to question things, you know, that's a first step in toward being a critical thinker, ladies and gentlemen. It's the first honest step towards being a truth seeker. And sometimes, yes, indeed, you hear things sit out, and the knee-jerk reaction is that's nuts. That can't possibly be the case. But folks, let me just explain to you again. Those of you that are new to the show tonight, that may be tuning in for the first time, and those of you that are my loyal listeners, my loyal fan base, I appreciate, again, you're counseling me to you know, some things you can't quite grasp. I understand that, but let me just tell you, I'm a scientist first and foremost. I haven't gone to MIT. I don't have all of the prestigious scientific papers, but to my credit, but let me tell you, folks, I understand the scientific model, and the scientific model is simply this. You must first of all observe a phenomenon. You must observe something, whether it's a natural sequence, whether it's a abnormality, whatever it may be. You observe that and then replicate it. If it's replicatable every, you know, on like a clockwork, it happens all the time on schedule, where you got something that you can watch and you can see, okay? And then you apply the rationale of the mechanisms behind observing that scientific phenomenon. Folks, that is what is called truth. See, it's not subjective. It's not me saying this is the way it's going to be, this is the way it is, because I think it's the way it is. No. You simply observe, you watch, you notice the mechanisms, and then you make the declaration and publish the information to those who want to know the truth. This is what I observe. This is what I see. What am I missing? You see, I have colleagues out there that I bounce things off of and say, you know, I've observed this, I've seen this, this is my hypothesis, this is my theory of why it is, and I can replicate the mechanisms. What am I missing? And more often than not, my colleagues come back and say, yeah, wow, you've got something. You're going to write a paper about that? Yeah, I will. Well, that's the scientific model. That's what science is really all about. You see, the very term science, the very word itself, science, the root word means basically to know, to see, to understand. Okay? And my biggest problem in the scientific world of today, folks, is there's too much pseudo science going on. There's too much that says, well, I just accept something because it's the status quo. It's the norm, or if you will. And we really don't want to question the norm. In other words, I don't care if, to me, that emperor sitting on that throne naked as a jaybird, if everybody says he's got a great, beautiful set of clothes on, well, I guess I'll accept it because I don't want to rock the boat. See, that's pseudoscience, okay? Folks, we're back tonight on the show with a special guest. His name is Edward Hendrie. He comes to us from the great state of Virginia. He's written a number of books, a number of incredible books. And, you know, it's funny because I got to tell you, I got to give a shout out to my co-host, Alex Studer. Alex he's very opinionated gentleman, and he's very smart, and he's educated in a lot of ways. And, you know, Alex has got ideas again, based on what his experience has shown. Alex sent to me a book in the mail. I got it just before my surgery a couple of weeks ago. It came without any type of notice, anything. It's just in a manila envelope, and this book came, written by my guest tonight, Edward Hendrie. I thought, well, this is an interesting topic. The book is entitled "The Greatest Lie on Earth." The Greatest Lie on Earth. That immediately caught my interest. Okay, there's more to the title. We'll get into that a little bit later. But I'm sitting there as I read the back cover of the book. My thought process began to churn, and I said, I got to dig into this. What a great time to dig into this when I'm going to be recuperating from a kind of a major type of surgery, a total knee replacement. Me long, ladies and gentlemen, the first 3 chapters, I thought, this is amazing. Yeah, I can see exactly the thought process of the author, Edward Hendrie, and I said, I got a hold of Alex, and I didn't have any clue that Alex had sent the book to me. But I come and I says, I got this book. I had just assumed, you know, I have so many guests that I interview, and they send me their book that's upcoming, or they want to be featured on the show, and they'll send me a copy of the book. I thought that's where it came from. So I was trying to find out, you know, who in the world is Edward Hendrie, and who sent the book. And Alex fessed up, said he sent the book to me. And I just want to give a big shout out of thanks to Alex for caring enough to send that book. Because I mean to tell you, I've not only read the book, I've reread it, the pertinent chapters many times over. It's phenomenal, ladies and gentlemen. Flat out phenomenal. And so I had Dominique, my producer, do some homework, found out a little bit more about the author, made a contact information, got his email, and the rest is history. I'm just so grateful that Mr. Hendrie has consented to be on the story behind the story tonight. So without further ado, let me bring Edward Hendrie, author, onto the show tonight. Welcome to the show, Edward.
Well, thank you, True. It's good to be here, and I'd like to thank Alex for sending you that book.
Yeah, I'm so happy he did, because this what you've done in the pages of this book, in my opinion, is to take a number of what is typically disjointed, let's call them conspiracy theories, for lack of a better word. I hate that word, by the way. But you've been able to take these and weave them together, and yes, indeed, there is indeed the greatest one of all, which is a lie that is so incredibly widespread, not only in America now, but worldwide now. Okay, it's the general consensus. And it's been my experience that the greater the lie is, the more widely believed the lie is, the greater the opposition from the general public is when that lie is exposed. Does that make sense to you, Edward?
Oh, absolutely. And this is the mother of all lies, the mother of all conspiracies. And we're not talking about a conspiracy theory. I mean, this is conspiracy fact. This is conspiracy reality. This is the evidence in the book sets forth ineluctable facts that reveal as I say, the mother of all conspiracies.
Okay, and in discussing how to tackle this book and do it in a way that first of all gets people interested in getting a copy of your book, okay? Because I highly recommend this to the listeners and folks that you listen to the show tonight. Make sure you take notes on how to get yourself a copy of this. And please, if what you're hearing tonight, don't make snap, knee-jerk reaction type of judgments. I just ask you one thing: get the book, read it, dissect it as a child. Put yourself back into your like a 6-year-old first grade mentality. You don't know everything. Let's learn something. Let's take it for what it is at face value, and let's analyze it together and see if we can come to some common ground conclusions. Let's throw away the knee-jerk reactions to this, because I'm telling you, you have to do that to get to the root of the problem here, okay? And so there's so many facets of this topic, Edward, that we can talk with. I sent you an email earlier. Let's just kind of follow along with that. I don't mind telling people your background is what you do is for a work is that you're an attorney, correct?
That's correct.
And so going through law school, getting to be certified as an attorney, you have to have a certain amount of logic dictating arguments, right? You have to sit down and basically show the weight of pros and cons before coming to a conclusion, if you're a good attorney.
That's right. You have to look at evidence, and you have to look at reliable evidence. So one of the important things in any trial is that for something to be introduced at trial, it has to be determined to be reliable. So it's very much like science in the sense that you have to prove your case, but you can't prove your case with something that is not reliable. So one of the most important things that a judge has to consider before letting any evidence in is this evidence reliable evidence, okay? And that is what I've tried to present in this book. And I've put the authority for everything I say in that book. Virtually everything is cited, so people can check the source for my information. They can check the reliability, because just because a lawyer says something doesn't make it true. It doesn't matter who it is that says anything, whether it's a scientist, a lawyer. What they say has validity based on the authority that backs what they say. So you have to look behind what the person is saying in determining the validity of what they're saying. So please do that. Look at the book, read it with a critical eye, and look at the evidence.
Right on, right on. That's I got to tell you, I hope you don't take offense at this, Edward, but your book is not my favorite book. It's right up there in the top 10, I got to tell you. But my favorite book is Bible, because I'm telling you, you get into the nuances. I mean, you really study the original Greek texts and the Hebrew texts of the Tanakh, the Old Testament. You get into it. It's an incredible volume of truth in a height, depth, width, and breadth. Okay, we've had shows on this. I've shown the nuances of the so-called numerical Bible codes running all through the Old and New Testaments, and it's such that, again, like Edward just said so very succinctly, what is the evidence? What is the science behind making a rational, honest, fact-based conclusion? the Bible has some incredible things in it, as you know, Edward. We've had a discussion quite a lot on the phone lately. But Pontius Pilate said to Christ at his trial, when he looked him over and found no fault in the man, he asked the eternal question, what is truth? What is truth? You see, truth is not something that's subjective, like you said, something that a radio talk show host says is authoritatively correct. No, truth is observable, it's documented, it's not subjective, it is absolutely empirical. In other words, you can observe it and see it, and it's like that all the time. The problem is the truth becomes so evident sometimes you can't see the forest because that darn tree is blocking your view.
Yeah,
it's right.
And
it's right there.
I couldn't agree with you more. I couldn't agree with you more. The King James Bible is pure truth. It is God's word in the English language, and the other Bible versions. And I don't know if you wanted to get into that topic, but the other Bible versions are corruptions. They're actually satanic, and I know that's a pretty radical statement to make. But if you look at the New International Version, for example, they refer to Lucifer in that book as the morning star. Well, we know that Jesus Christ is the morning star.
Right.
So they have replaced Lucifer with Jesus Christ. And what did Jesus say was the unforgivable sin? To attribute to God the characteristics of the devil.
Yes, indeed. And you see again the whole central hoax or conspiracy, folks, is the things we're going to talk about today, and this book will really help you see the big picture, the tapestry, if you will, that's going to be brought together with us. Because behind all this, whether it's the adulteration of God's word into these different versions, that's talked about in the book as well. Very well done, Edward. You're right on. The versions of the Bible we have, the history of the scholars of King James. I did a paper on that. I'd be happy to send it out to you on my research on King James and his scholars. It was like a miracle that these men were even put on the earth at that time to do their job. It really is an amazing story. And of course, behind the scenes, you have this group of people that are trying to literally kill everybody. The gunpowder plot, to blow up Parliament. That was to stop this King James Bible project.
Yes. Yes, you're correct.
So, golly, it's these conspiracies, folks, are interwoven. I kind of want to give out my top 5, what I consider to be my top 5 hoaxes, okay? And just explain what a hoax is. It's another synonym for a hoax is a mass delusion. There's people that like to play pranks sometimes and play jokes on people. And if they're harmless little pranks, that's one thing. But hoaxes are much different. They can be on a grand global scale. I hate to use that word, but a huge scale that basically sucks in the whole world. Okay, and so on the grand scale of hoaxes, let me give you my top 5. And there's some of this is subjective, I'm sure. Some people will list others, but let me give them to you, folks. Number 1 has to be, in my 20 years of doing investigative journalism and radio show, and coming from it as an objective, non-hate mongering Christian. Okay, I'm just observing here. The biggest hoax to me is that today's Ashkenazim people of Israel are not Abraham's seed. And thus they're not God's chosen people at all. They're from the Khazar nation. They have nothing to do with Abraham. They shouldn't be hoaxing the world into believing that they are these special people. That's the first big hoax. I would say, secondly, the events of September 11th. Now, Edward, you've written a great book on September 11th. I have not had the privilege of getting that book. But would you agree with me? That's one of the top hoaxes as well, the events of September 11th.
I would agree with you.
We've got,
Yes.
and you talk in the pages of your book, right in the middle section of the book is your expose of NASA's Apollo missions. Oh my stars, that's apropos. I thought I knew all. I've actually researched this to some degree, but not like you have. I'm sitting there reading those pages of the hoax that is Apollo moon missions, and I thought I knew things about it, but I don't. There were things in there that just shocked me. So NASA's Apollo moon mission is a flat out hoax. I think you, as an attorney, you proved your case on that one. Tied into that is what I call number 4, the theory of relativity by Albert Einstein. The more, going through the school system and getting my higher degrees of education, that's one of the sacred cows in physics that you just don't really want to question if you want to have any professor give you a passing grade. But I had questions about the theory of relativity that nobody would dare answer, and I've always thought that doesn't make sense, and it surely doesn't explain the thermonuclear reaction of atomic bombs and fission and energy. It does not. You explore that in the pages of this book in a powerful way. A powerful way. And finally, the biggest hoax to me, and number 5, folks, think about this rationally. And in you talk about this in the book so very well, Edward. Let me just read verbatim from the cover of the back cover of your book. Quote, "The most universally accepted scientific belief today is that the Earth is a globe spinning on its axis at a speed of approximately 1,000 miles per hour at the equator. Well, at the same time, it is orbiting the sun at approximately 67,000 miles per hour." Now, folks, stop right there in that first sentence. Yeah, we all understand the model. We've been ingrained to believe that the Earth is spinning, that we're hurtling through space. But with the circumference and the radius of the numbers of the Earth itself, do you ever stop to realize that to have it fit the model, it has to be going at a certain rate of speed to fit the model? And yes, I verified these numbers with author Hendrie's endnotes, and you know what? He's right on. 1,000 miles per hour. Man, that's fast. That's how much it's spinning. Okay, not only that, it's moving through space at 67,000 miles per hour. And then according to NASA's own projections and the International Space figures, the sun itself is hurtling through the Milky Way at 500,000 miles per hour. The galaxy, called the Milky Way galaxy, then is supposed to be racing through space, get this, folks, 300,000 to 1,300,000 miles per hour. Now, wait a minute. Let's look at that objectively. Let's look at that paragraph objectively. Okay? I'm just sitting here. That sounds it sounds 10 times crazier to me to believe that at face value than it is to accept that the Twin Towers collapsed because of melting metal. Collapsed in free fall speed. The explanation for the official version of September 11th does not make sense. It's not you can't replicate that. Spinning on its axis at 1,000 miles per hour. Edward, that's fast.
That's what they want you to believe. That's what you're told. That's what you're told is a fact.
Now I'm going to play the devil's advocate here because I'm good at that. Okay,
Okay.
I'm going to be the prosecuting attorney on that back statement. I'm saying, well, surely NASA has all of the physics equations to prove that, right? I when I read your chapters on NASA, I went back and did my own search to find out where they get the numbers from, and I couldn't find it out. It's conjecture. It's theory. There's nothing. There's no speedometer. There's no measurement. Are you with me?
It's completely made up. It is not truly science. It is more akin to a religious belief. There is no evidence that supports these speeds. They're conjecture.
Well, what was amazing, and you point this out in your book so very well, and I, golly, that's why I say I take my hat off to your research, because I thought I was pretty well educated. I really did. You actually show in the pages of the book studies conducted to prove the spinning globe that were done by proponents of the theory, and what we find instead is proof that it's not moving, that it's stationary and rock solid.
That's correct.
Let's talk about that.
That's correct. And it rocked the scientific world, because the experiment, and you're referring to the Michelson-Morley experiment, had a null result showing no movement at all. And they didn't know what to do. But they did do something.
They did do something.
But they did do something.
Enter in then Albert Einstein to basically shout down Michelson-Morley. I had not heard of those two scientists. I got to be honest with you. I was ignorant as could be. Your endnotes, I pulled them up. I pulled. Thank goodness for the internet that I can do that. And I got to tell you, my jaw was bouncing off the floor. I've never heard of those men.
No. And your audience, many in your audience, probably have never heard of Michelson-Morley. It's not taught in school. There are physicists who have their PhDs who've never heard of Michelson-Morley. It is a deep, dark secret of science.
Let's be specific. So Michelson is a last name, and Morley is a last name. So it's Michelson / Morley. Let's talk about who these men are, okay?
Okay, they were physicists that actually Michelson was a chemist, okay? But they were doing physical experiments using an interferometer to measure light rays. And their interferometer was very precise. They published their results, and the interferometer was designed to show the movement of the Earth, its spin, its rotation, its orbit. So it was going to show the movement of the Earth, but it showed no movement at all. And they were puzzled by this. They could not understand how it is that their experiment had a null result. And in fact, every experiment that has been done since then has been a null result, meaning there's no movement. Well, it was based on the light being the speed of light going through the ether being slower in one axis than in another if it was on a moving plane, okay, it was on a moving object. If I can explain it this way, many have been standing by railroad tracks or maybe by the roadway when you hear a siren coming or you hear the horn on a train. As the train approaches, it is a higher pitch because the waves are moving the sound waves are moving, and they're being compressed by the speed of the train. As the train goes by, it's the same horn, it's making the same sound, but suddenly the tone changes to a lower tone as the train goes by because the waves are becoming spread as the train goes by. If you can think of it that way, I'm trying to draw an analogy to light waves. Light also travels in waves, and so the speed of the light traveling in the interferometer would be detected. Well, they had to explain why there was no movement shown, because the orthodox view of science at that time and even today is that the Earth is spinning at 1,000 miles per hour at the equator in order to make one revolution in a 24-hour period of time.
Right.
So they had no explanation for that. They were scratching their heads. They didn't know what to do. So Albert Einstein was brought on the scene, and I say brought on the scene because he wasn't a very good scientist. He was a showman, and he was playing a role. He was portrayed as a brilliant scientist, and he came by with this theory of relativity. And the theory of relativity was a way to explain away the Michelson-Morley null result. And his theory of relativity was that an object in motion, in comparison to an object that's standing still, there's no way to tell which one is moving. You cannot tell which is moving. So, for instance, according to the theory of relativity, if you trip and fall, and you fall to the ground and your nose hits the cement, okay, it's according to the theory of relativity, and I'm not making this up, this is the theory of relativity, it's
right.
as likely that the Earth came up and smashed you in the nose as you fell to the Earth. So either one is equally likely under the scientific theory of relativity.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah,
you're absolutely
that's
right.
what
Yeah.
relativity is. That's what relativity is. And he just by the stroke of a pen said there is no ether. So he got rid of, in order for a wave to be a wave, it has to move through something. Okay, so if you can think of a wave on a shore that comes to the shore, okay, think of a wave without the water. You can't have a wave without an object. So sound waves travel through the atmosphere. Well, light waves travel through what is known as the ether. And by the way, the ether does exist because there are instruments used in airplanes that require an ether for them to function. Okay, there are compasses and other instruments that require the ether. So, in any event, it's been proven by experiments that the ether does in fact exist. But the truth wasn't going to get in the way of Einstein's theory of relativity and his object, which was to explain away the Michelson-Morley null result. They simply could not have a non-moving Earth. And so they had to explain it away, and that's how they did it.
Yeah, and in your chapter here, chapter 20, Scientific Proof the Earth Does Not Move, and you dissect the Michelson-Morley experiment, the light waves, and then you bring in quotes from Albert Einstein to his fiancée, to other people. It's pretty doggone clear, folks, that Einstein was indeed playing the showman. Because you see, here's the reality, and you point this out so very well. The theory of relativity does not offer proof of any spinning Earth, whereas Michelson-Morley does just the opposite. It shows that it doesn't move, and so it's so simple. As you really dissect what Michelson and Morley did, it's like brilliant. Of course. Now again, let me emphasize that Michelson was born in 1852, passed away in the year 1931. Chemist E.W. Morley 1838, passed away in 1923. Both of these gentlemen, in their papers and their background history, were proponents of the spinning earth, okay? They were trying to prove, and they were going to their experiment, correct me if I'm wrong here, Edward, but they were going into to prove the speed in which it moved, to be precise in the speed of movement.
That's right. That's right. They were proponents. Yeah, that's right. They were scratching their heads too. They didn't know what to make of it. Yes.
Wait a minute. Stop the presses. What blows me away? I've taken advanced calculus courses. I have taken some physics courses. I'm not a physicist, but I've taken enough to be dangerous. What makes my blood boil is, why do I have to read a book by an attorney named Edward Hendrie to learn about the Michelson-Morley experiments?
Well, you're not the only one. There are physicists. There are physicists whose training is in physics that don't know about the Michelson-Morley experiment.
I tell you, I have to laugh or I start throwing things, and I'm in pain. I don't want to start throwing things. I'm sitting there with my knee propped up. It even hurts to laugh, but I got to tell you, I got to laugh at this because holy mackerel. So you see, folks, what we're getting at here, who paid for Albert Einstein to do this? Did Albert Einstein just come on the scene just with a specific agenda, or is it go even deeper than that? Well, researcher, author Edward Hendrie has shown that it goes much deeper. It's a tapestry. It's intricate. Look at the history and who Albert Einstein was. Did you realize Albert Einstein in 1952 was asked to go to Israel and become Israel's prime minister and president? Folks, he's a Zionist of the highest order, and that goes into the next phase of this. Who is doing this and why? You see, who are these people that want us to believe the lie? That's what you got to ask in any type of scientific model, is the question, why? Why? What is all this about, you see? Go ahead, Edward. Take a stab at that question.
Let's talk about that. What they're doing is they're concealing the existence of God. Ultimately, that's what they're doing. Because if you read, and of course I recommend that you all read the King James Bible, it says the invisible things from creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead. So they are without excuse. That's from Romans chapter 1, verse 20. His creation, God's creation, reveals, okay, the invisible things of him. So his character, his nature is revealed in his creation. If people have a skewed view, an inaccurate view of God's creation, they will have an inaccurate view of God. If they think, for instance, that beyond the sky is an empty vacuum of space that goes for infinity, and there's nothing up there but other planets and other suns and other moons, it removes from people the thought that God is close by in heaven, that in fact they will not think much of God. And that's the whole point here, is to remove God from people's minds. Because if you can do that, then you can remove his commandments. It's easy to violate his commandments. Man can become his own God, make his own rules, and not be beholden to what the Bible says. Because after all, the view is that there is no God. And as you mentioned, the Zionist Jews are communists at heart. In fact, pure communism is found in Israel. In the kibbutzim, you'll find pure communism. And as you know, communism is atheistic. It's an atheistic form of government. So whether you're talking about science or whether you're talking about government, it all comes back to religion. So the scientific deceptions, just as with government deceptions, involve religious deceptions at their heart. And that's what we're talking about here. This is a religious deception.
Indeed. We got some questions popping up at the chat room that we're going to get to for sure. But I want to just, this is the hinge, folks, this whole discussion is going on, is why are they doing this? And you know, the answers to that are in the pages of his book so very well. And you got to get the entire big picture. I go back to my King James Bible. I read in the book of 2 Thessalonians. The Apostle Paul is basically telling us what's going to be like in our time now, the end times of the world. And he says it very clearly that there in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 that there will be a strong delusion, the working of the evil one, basically. I'm going to paraphrase. It has all power, signs, and lying wonders, and they will be given what he calls a strong delusion, a strong hoax, a strong one, folks, that they should believe a lie. A lie.
Yes. Yes. And people, excuse me, must understand that, as it says in the letter to the Ephesians, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. So you have to understand that this deception is coming from very high places, very powerful people. This is being imposed on us. Okay, this is not a popular movement to deceive the masses. No, there is a very powerful core of people that are immensely powerful, immensely wealthy, and their objective is to enslave the world. And they are in direct contact with Satan and Satan's minions, the devils, who were cast out of heaven.
Yeah, that's what you do so well in the pages of the book again as well, folks. The origins of this concept of what's called heliocentrism, which is basically the moving Earth, the globe, the solar system, all this, the very basic structures of what's called heliocentrism comes directly from the pages of the Kabbalah, the black magic book of the Zohar, if you will. This is where this is all coming from. This is not originated from the mind of scientists like Albert Einstein or others. It goes clear back into the very time of Jesus Christ himself. This was being taught and put forth by these rabbis who Christ declared to them, "You of your father the devil. These are the lies that you're bringing forth, you hypocrites." This is a very basic dark lie that's been going on for millennium. It really has.
Yes, and many of the foundational, I call them foundational theories of science, like gravity, for instance, come right out of the pages of the Kabbalah. Isaac Newton got his theory of gravity from the Kabbalah. But in fact, there is no such thing as gravity. He made that up. He made that up as a way of explaining, I shouldn't say made it up, he extracted it from the Kabbalah, okay? It is a religious deception. It's not science, okay? It's based on religion. But the term gravity is a term he made up in order to explain why it is we're not flying off this spinning globe. There had to be an explanation for why centrifugal force, people aren't flying off into space. Well, he read the Kabbalah, okay, and there it is. Gravity, a mystical force of gravity that not only has the force of attraction to keep people stuck to the ball, but it also has a force of that repels, so that planets now circle one another. Okay, it's quite a force. It does two things at once.
Indeed, indeed. That's all in the pages of the book too. Expose on Sir Isaac Newton and what he was really all about. Going back to the Jesuit order, folks, in the Jesuit order of Roman Catholicism is really what's called it's Judaism. It's Jews masquerading as Christians. No doubt about that. I did expose show after that one as well. You know, there's a reason why the Roman Catholic bishops and cardinals and pope wear the Jewish yarmulke skull caps. They're the same tribe. But that's another discussion for another section. We got some really good questions that are being asked there in the chat room. One fellow there's actually two questions. Let's just put them all together, because I mean these are good thought-provoking questions. The question is, if the Earth is not a globe moving and spinning like we're talking about, how then do the other planets and stars factor into this equation relative to the Earth? That's the first part of the question. The second part is question B: do the Birkeland currents that feed our solar system with plasma act as a carrier wave for the possible ether current? Good questions. Good questions.
Okay, well, let me answer them. Okay, the first question was the planets. Okay, first of all, the term planets is basically it implies a wandering star. So a planet is something that moves. Now, if you look at the other stars in the sky, they are like the lights on a chandelier. Okay, they are fixed in relation to one another. So they are, and actually, it's a little bit inaccurate to call them like a chandelier, because if you move around a chandelier, you will see parallax between the lights on the chandelier. So it's not an apt description. There is no parallax between the stars when you look at them in the sky. So when you look up in the sky, the stars are moving in a fixed plane. Okay. So they are moving fixed in relation to one another. If you could think of it as a chandelier that is completely flat, okay? So as they move, if you look at a time-lapse photography, you will see that all of the stars move across the sky in relation to one another in a fixed plane. They don't move. If we were spinning, there would be parallax. That is, one star that's more distant than the other would move in relation to another star. You would see them. It's like when you walk around a tree. One tree will cross the other. That's the parallax I'm talking about. Now, there are certain stars that move in the sky, and those are what we call the planets. If you look at the planets, however, through a telescope, they look very different from the depictions that NASA is showing you. So the NASA depictions of the planets and the NASA depictions of the stars and the Hubble alleged photographs look nothing at all like what you see when you look through a telescope. It is a massive deception as to what they are purporting the planets to look like and what they purport the stars to look like. So if you look above the sky, the moon, the sun, the stars, they are in the firmament, just as the Bible says. I know this is hard for people to get their minds around, because all of your lives, and I've suffered the same thing, you've been taught that there's an infinite space out there, and the sun is 93 million miles away, but in fact, the sun is rather close, and the moon is rather close, okay? It's not what you envision in your mind as you've been taught. It is what you see. What you see happening is actually what's happening. That's what I'm trying to get across. Yeah, what you see is what's happening.
I like your explanation in the book about the Polaris, the North Star. That's fixed. That's immovable.
Oh, yeah. Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about that. If the Earth is rotating around the sun, Okay, it's orbiting the sun, and and at the same time it's spinning. So it's spinning at 1,000 miles per hour on allegedly its axis. Okay, but it's rotating. It's orbiting the sun at 67,000 miles per hour. Now, the Polaris is supposed to be many, many light years away, okay? And a light year is how far you can travel at the speed of light in a year. So that gives you an idea how far away Polaris is. And I can't remember off the top of my head the distance that they purport Polaris to be, but it's a fictional distance. They just made it up. And the reason they make up such long distances is because they have to explain why there's no parallax between the stars. And so their explanation is the stars are so far away in relation to one another that you can't sense the parallax. But that's ridiculous because that doesn't matter how far away they're going to be. There will always be parallax. But anyway, that's a deep discussion for scientists to discuss at another time. But let me make the point here that it's impossible for Polaris, the North Star, to stay fixed in the sky as the Earth is supposed to be careening through space at 67,000 miles per hour. And at the same time, our solar system, okay, is supposed to be hurling through the Milky Way at 500,000 miles per hour. And then the Milky Way is supposed to be, depending on which scientific journal you read, is supposed to be moving through space at between 300,000 and 1,300,000 miles per hour. It's absurd. It's a fairy tale. No child would believe it if you tried to explain it to them. They would say it's impossible for this star to remain fixed. So what does that tell you? That tells you that star is fixed, the Earth is fixed, and neither one are moving. And the other stars are moving around Polaris, the North Star. And if you look at time-lapse photography, you can see that. The other stars move around Polaris.
Indeed. You know, I have astronomy, Edward, I do. Not astrology now. Astronomy is the study of the heavens. Astrology is the study of soothsaying, whatever. But astronomy, my uncle Leighton Ott here in Ogden, Utah, actually funded a planetarium, an observatory. And I spend my share of time there. And I got to tell you, I've always been intrigued with the North Star, Polaris, because it's fixed. It's been fixed for eons of time. And I got to tell you, the scientific mind in me is saying, how can this be if we're moving this fast? And the scientists, the physicists of the planetarium says, well, it's just kind of a mystery. It's kind of a miracle. But see, wow, yeah, okay, well.
Another proof that we're not moving, as the heliocentric model purports, is that if that were the case, then 6 months from now, noon will be in the middle of the night because we will be 180 degrees opposite the sun, and the Earth spins once every 24 hours.
Okay.
So if it's
now that'll gonna mess up our audience for sure. We're gonna take a break at the top of the hour in just a few more minutes, but let's jump on that in the top of the hour. Come back. Think about this one, folks. Yeah, if the model that we've been taught is true, every 6 months, 12 o'clock noon will be midnight. It's not happening. We'll tell you why that's. I mean, come on, it's self-evident. I'll take a break. This is the top of the hour. This is the story behind the story. I'm Dr. James Fruit, my special guest tonight from Virginia. Oh yes, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Welcome back to the second hour of today's story behind the story. Yes, we're still here with you. I'm hanging in there, folks. I'm definitely feeling the pain of a of a wounded knee, but my heart's not buried in my wounded knee. My heart and my mind is excited as all get out about sharing this important information with you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for having an open mind. Thank you for thinking this through, because I'm telling you, this is groundbreaking. This is, yeah, let me say, shall we say, earth-shattering information. And I bring this to you because it's, in my opinion, critical information. Because you see, as a man thinketh, so is he, and a woman as well. If you can't have a correct concept of eternity, of the biological, geological nature, the truth of things, how can you ever really truly be free? Jesus Christ said it best, the truth shall indeed set you free. Set you free from what? Set your mind free, ladies and gentlemen, from the baggage and chains of misinformation, disinformation, and the lack of faith. We're going to bring my guest back on, Mr. Edward Hendrie, author coming to us from Virginia. Mr. Hendrie's written a number of books. Many of them are just, if they're half as good as the book that we're reviewing today, you know, they're fantastic. Let me tell you, folks, last year I toured the little nation state of Israel. I was amazed as I walked among the people there in the old city of Jerusalem. I talked to some of the learned rabbis. If they would ever engage you, first of all, you're below them. You're beneath contempt to most of them. That the rank and file people of Jerusalem and Israel as a whole were very kind and very easy to talk with. It became very apparent. I was there for over 2 weeks. The secularity of the people of Israel. I mean, when I say secularity, they're really not religious for the most part. They were very much like, well, we're science driven. We're this, we're that. We're very pragmatic and realistic. I took a discussion. We were out on the ancient place of Jericho, the ancient city of Jericho, you know, where Joshua of the Bible, you know, had a battle and the walls came tumbling down. Yeah, archaeologically, that's what they're finding. They unearthed the actual walls of Jericho that did come tumbling down, and talking to some of the people that work there, they're employed by the state of Israel. I asked them, isn't this wonderful that here's the pages of your Tanakh, your Old Testament coming to life? And I couldn't believe their response. They were like, well, it's just a job, but, you know, this is like Disneyland to us. What do you mean? Well, it's all a fairy tale. It's all a hoax. It's all, you know, we can't really believe this. Why? Why can you not believe the evidence of these walls that tumbled down and formed a ramp where the invading army of Joshua can come in, and it's all there. Everything. The biblical account is like, okay, it's being unfolded in this this is just one of literally hundreds of archaeological sites. The response shook me up, because the gentleman that I was speaking with, he said, well, everybody knows that the book of John simply be true. Oh, why? Give me a specific. And this gentleman pointed to the part of the book of Joshua, you know, where in order for Joshua to do some of his work commanded by God, the God of Israel, the book of Joshua is very clear that the sun and the moon stopped. The days were lengthened. This is all documented in the book of Joshua. And this fellow pointed and says, this just can't happen. It's not possible. Not possible. Why? Oh, that's just, you can't stop the planets from moving, this type of thing. It goes back to the heliocentric model, because, you know, if we're spinning at 1,000 miles per hour at the equator, and to make the sun stop, it means the earth has to stop right now. Well, you stop the earth, the centrifugal force of that, you may imagine traveling in the Bonneville salt flats on a race car at 1,000 miles an hour and suddenly stopping immediately. You go through the windshield and then some. You go right through not on the windshield, you go through the metal itself. So the whole Newton theory of gravity, you see, is gone. So this the secular world is saying, you see, the Bible can't possibly be true. This is not real. And goes back to exactly what my guest Edward has said in the first part of the show. This whole model is specifically designed to get people to not believe, first of all, the holy text of the Bible, not believe, not trust in the Bible, and by doing that, then you substitute that for such works as the Zohar, the Kabbalah. It's replaced with the works of the adversary to God. And we've been saying this the whole time. Those of you who listen to the show, we've said this over and over and over again. This is not a battle between flesh and blood. It's just as Paul said to the Galatians, this is a battle of spiritual darkness, spiritual wickedness in high places. It's unseen forces of darkness, folks, that we battle against. We don't fight against the Jewish people of Israel. We don't fight against the common man. We fight against those people that have so warped their minds by putting in the lie, the strong delusion that Paul said would come in our day, and that's exactly what's happening. We're here shedding light, the light of truth, on these absolute incredible delusional lies. Welcome back to the show, Edward. Before we left the show, we talked about what happens if in fact the model, based on the circumference measurements in miles of the earth, the radius of the earth, in order for the earth to finish a full rotation in a 24-hour day, right, and to fulfill its cycles of the so-called solstices of the seasons, this is in the pages of your book as you map it out. And yes, I did that. I just didn't take your word for it. I did my own calculations on my computer and my handheld trig calculator, and you're absolutely right. And I thought, why didn't I see that before? In other words, if you go ahead, explain it. Explain it.
It's quite simple. If people can envision in their minds the model they've been taught, with the sun in the center of the solar system and the earth orbiting the sun once every year, let's just take a random starting point of, let's take September 22nd. If you start at September 22nd at high noon, in 6 months, it'll be March 20th, the 21st, okay? That high noon will be opposite the sun, okay? So you will actually be in darkness at high noon 6 months from September. And by the way, it will happen a little bit at a time each day as you go around the sun. Noon will shift each day, but we know that doesn't happen. So what I'm telling you is what the model requires is that noon be in the middle of the night every 6 months, and of course it will gradually happen each day, okay, as the Earth orbits the sun. But that doesn't happen. Noon happens every day, just as the sun is at high noon every day. Now, noon, and we can get into how it is we have different time zones, but in the olden days, before we had time zones, every city had a different time. So time was measured by high noon. So high noon was noon during the day in one city. 300 miles away, noon would be at a different time in that city because the sun would not reach high noon until another time. But they had a problem with trains and running on time. They had to have the same time schedule, and so that's how we ended up with time zones. Kind of an interesting little bit of history. But anyway, getting back to this, there's no good explanation. They've tried to explain it. Scientists have perceived the problem. They've come up with what is called a sidereal day. There's no such thing as a sidereal day. They just made that up. Sidereal deals with the movement of the stars, not the sun, okay? And by the way, we know that we have exactly 24-hour days because when people use the sun for navigation, it's based on the movement of the sun every 24 hours. So it does now, of course, they assume that the Earth is round, okay, and they base their calculus on that. But the bottom line is the sun is in the same spot every 24 hours, 24 hours later. Now, it does move in its circuit. There is a circuit it travels in, okay? And so as the summer months, it's higher in the sky, and then the winter months, it's lower in the sky. That's part of the sun's circuit, okay? But as far as high noon's high noon each day.
That's right. It was such a simple thing. Why didn't I? Duh. As I read that in the book and I calculated it out, I thought, my goodness, that's right. When it's at New York City, like in your example, 6 months from September 21st, the spring equinox, 12 o'clock noon is still 12 o'clock noon, high noon. But you follow the rotations, follow the cycles. It's 12 o'clock in the middle of the night, but it's not.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's stunning.
Oh, by the way, I was mentioning the North Star. It's actually, the scientists say it's 433.8 light years away. That means it would take 433.8 years at the speed of light, 186,000 miles per second, to get to the North Star. That's how far away it is. It's just, they just make this stuff up, by the way. How do they come up with these figures? They just knew they had to make it way, way far away in order to explain away the fact that there is no parallax between the stars.
And I've always wondered, this has been my question to my physics professors, the classes I did take, was like, excuse me, how do you measure a light year? How, really, come on. How do you measure from Earth to Alpha Centauri or to the Polaris? How do you do this? Do you bounce is there a model to show how they've calculated? Because I really wanted to know. I was inquiring mind, wanted to know, and it was like, oh, well, they would fill up a whole 10 chalkboards with the equation to figure it out. So it's beyond me. It goes back to what you say in the book. It's like dazzle them with BS. Because
yes.
They just say, well, it's too complicated for your finite little pea brain to figure out. Trust us, we got the geniuses of the Einsteins behind us to tell us. So just believe us, right?
Yeah, they use equations. They don't actually use physical experimentation, physical instrumentation. They use equations, and you're absolutely right. They do that to dazzle people.
Yeah. Question from the chat room.
Example. Let's just give an example, simple example that I have in the book of how they deceive people with equations. In simple algebra, you know that if you multiply each side of an equation by the same number, it doesn't affect the value of that equation. So, for instance, if I had, that a half empty glass is equal to a half full glass. You would agree with that, right?
Sure.
Half empty glass, it's exactly the same. You're just looking at it differently. So you say it's half empty, I say it's half full, but the same glass. So we'll write an equation. 1/2 E equals 1/2 F. Okay? So if we multiply both sides by 2, as under the rules of algebra, that means that E would equal F. An empty glass would equal a full glass. Well, we know in reality an empty glass does not equal a full glass. So here's an example of where mathematics can be used to prove something supposedly, but in reality what it proves is false.
All relative. It's a theory of relativity. That glass is not empty, Edward. It's all full of energy. You just can't see it. It's mass times the speed of light squared. Don't you know that? Come on now. Come on.
Well, that's funny you bring up relativity because Dr. Dingle, who was one of the foremost experts in relativity, came up with a paradox that he could not explain. And he wrote to scientific journals about this paradox, and he could not get published, so he wrote a book about it because he couldn't get published. But he was one of the foremost experts on relativity, and he realized that the theory of relativity is bunk. And here's the paradox he was faced with. According to Einstein, as you travel towards the speed of light, time will slow down. Okay,
right.
That's part and parcel of the theory of relativity. And the paradox Dr. Dingle came up with involved the two twins. Okay, now I'm going to use the two twins. He actually used two clocks, and he did that for a reason. And it's really, the reasons for that are beyond what we're discussing now, but he was very clever in the way he did it. He made the point that it is a paradox, and a paradox is something that can't be, that is, it's a falsehood. In other words, there's something wrong with the theory. That's what the paradox is. And the paradox is this. If a twin leaves the Earth in a spaceship and travels at the speed of light and then returns 10 years later, okay, he will only have aged maybe just a couple of days because time slows down for him. However, his twin will have aged 10 years. However, Dingle says, wait a minute, under the theory of relativity, then each twin is moving in relation to the other, and so it's relative. How can one be older than the other when, to the twin on Earth, it's the twin that's moving in the spaceship that's moving, but the one in the spaceship, it's the twin on Earth that's moving. And there's no way to tell under the theory of relativity which one is actually moving. How can one be older than the other? And nobody can answer that paradox.
That's thinking too deeply because, hey, the Earth is moving at thousands of miles an hour too.
Yeah.
So, as you see the big picture, like I said, as you read the pages of your book, step by step by step, line upon line, here a little, there a little, you get the full picture. And I got to tell you, masterfully done. How did people get a hold of your book? Let's just put that out real quickly. I really highly suggest that people get this book and dissect it.
Well, it's on Amazon. Tex Mars carries it on Power of Prophecy. You can buy it on Lulu. It's on Barnes and Noble. It's on all the bookstores have it. Now, it's online, I should say. The bookstores, I don't know if they're actually physically carrying it. Some bookstores will carry it, yeah.
But I'm going to actually do something. I told you I'll buy a case of these books from you, Edward, and I want to do a study groups on this because it's that important. The Christian body that I associate with here in northern Utah, I've bounced this off of a few of my friends, and I got to tell you, they look at me like, well, you've been taking too much pain meds there, Dr. Ott. You're thinking. I said, no, okay. Let's talk about it when I'm not on pain meds. I'll give you that because that's the knee-jerk reaction. Like, really? I said, yeah. Hold on. Let me give you a really good example of what I'm talking about here. We've got. The book is called, again, The Greatest Lie on Earth, Proof. Now, this is not conjecture. He gives proof in these pages. Proof that our world is not a moving globe. One of the things that really floored me here, and among other things, is your documentation in the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, that again, I'm not a pilot. The producer of the show, Dominique Rodriguez, is. He flies planes and this and that. But when I was about 20 years or so ago, I had a very close couple of friends who were high-level Federal Aviation Administration (FAA) trainers. What they did is the FAA comes out with equipment for air traffic controllers at the major airports across the world. They supply the equipment to basically, through radar and calculations, be able to, on a computer screen, juxtapose the position of planes in the air, their ETA of arrival, their departure times, it's a juggling act, right? They have to be very precise or there's going to be chaos in the skies. There's going to be planes colliding all the time. The FAA, ladies and gentlemen, has their computer models, and this is documented in his endnotes. Based on what? A globe? No, a flat Earth screen. I couldn't believe. Yeah, it's true, ladies and gentlemen. It's the truth. The FAA would have chaos if they tried to do computer graphing through gyroscopes on a model of a spinning Earth at 100,000 miles an hour. It'd be chaos. The computers can't program it because it's not real. Your comments on that? That blew me away. I got to tell you, I pulled your endnotes and documented. I'm sitting there, oh my stars. It actually says in the training manual, this is based on a flat Earth measurement. Let's call it azimuthal maps. Explain that to us.
Yeah. Well, think about it this way. If you have a typical cruising speed of 500 miles per hour, a plane traveling over a globe would have to descend 2,777 feet over a half a mile every minute in order to stay same elevation above that globe. But that's not what happens because they have gyroscopic artificial horizons which keeps them flat and steady. So they're flying flat and steady at 500 miles per hour at typical cruising speed for an airliner is 30,000 feet. They do not deviate in that height. The gyroscope, by the way, one of the characteristics, the most important characteristic of a gyroscope is that it has rigidity in space. That is, it is perfectly level at all times, and the plane, as it moves around the gyroscope, will show a different attitude in relation to the gyroscope, and it will be shown on the artificial horizon on the instrument panel. But the gyroscope itself, as it's spinning, is rigid in space and makes so the plane can be assured to be flying perfectly level. So you're absolutely correct. The FAA in their simulations, in their training, in their actual instruments, assume a flat Earth.
Let me just share with you the quote directly from your book. This is on page 54. This is taken right out of the FAA training manual. It's called TGF, stands for Target Generation Facility. It's a training laboratory where they train these air traffic controllers. This is from the manual, and I quote, the publication states, currently the aircraft dynamics incorporated in the TGF are based on the first principles of physics and aeronautics. The models provide the performance characteristics needed to support high-fidelity simulations. The TGF, again that stands for Target Generation Facility, incorporates models, environmental weather effects. Additionally, the modeled aircraft are representative of commercial air traffic in the United States National Airspace, NAS. As future simulations are developed or brought to the technical center, higher fidelity will be required to identify NAS operational safety and performance issues. The TGF is prepared to increase its fidelity and operational connectivity required to meet the demands by other FAA programs and simulators. The goal of this project has been to develop and maintain a high-fidelity simulation capability to meet the needs of the FAA in operation testing and evaluating its NAS. And it says it's right here, it's based on a flat Earth model, flat Earth publication. How can that be if this is all just a hoax? How can this possibly be? And when you realize that, what you said, the horizon has got to be fixed. whenever you look at a 500 mile per hour incoming aircraft, to make those constant nose calculations. And I have talked to a commercial air pilot of mine who came to visit me when I was down. I asked him about this. He looked at me and he said, yeah, that's something we really don't talk about too much as pilots, but you're absolutely right. I've wondered about that myself. I'm telling you, it's hard not to get upset at how much you've been lied to. Good heavens. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And then
this is a deception on a massive scale, and it starts at the first time a student walks into a classroom and sees the globe. I mean, that's the first inculcation into the new religion of heliocentricity. It's a religion. It is a booga booga religion, and people have bought into it hook, line, and sinker because they think it's science, but it's not. It's religion, and the religious priests are the high priests of science, and they cloak it in science, and the Bible says that it's science so-called. And God is so correct when he refers to science so-called being the basis of the massive deception that the world is under.
You have a picture in your book, and I verified this one too, folks. Again, when I read something, I verify it. And if it doesn't check out, I ignore it. I surely don't ask the author to be on my radio show. There's a picture here in what's called the White House Situation Room. On the wall, the White House Situation Room, there's no globe. What's on the wall is what's called a polar azimuthal equidistance map. In other words, it's the Earth as it really is. Okay. Now, I have a few friends in high places, not to steal a Garth Brooks song, but I made a few phone calls. I got to tell you, one of my friends my contacts is very connected in the Pentagon and understanding what happens at NORAD. Okay. And when I bounced this off of him, you know what his response was? Be careful how you talk about this, because there are people that have been killed for a whole lot less than getting this information. I said, what? This is really starting to tick me off. You mean to say that the highest levels of our government know full well that what the Earth is really like, and then they're just continuing to perpetrate this hoax? Yes. But be careful. Be careful, because in the words of of a famous movie, you can't handle the truth. So many people can't handle the truth. And it goes back again, as I said in the first hour, why is there such a hoax? Why is there such a fraud? Why is this going on? And the only answer that makes sense is just as you said so eloquently, Edward. It's to turn people's minds, hearts, and actually soul away from the creator of this universe, the God of the universe. I got to tell you, that's the only thing that makes sense here.
Yeah, and they've gone to such lengths because people will ask, well, wait a minute, no. I've seen pictures of the Earth from space.
Yeah.
They look at the NASA pictures. I've seen the pictures of Earth from space, but those NASA pictures are actually hoaxes. They have been shown, but they'd be photoshopped. And in my book, I prove it that they're photoshopped. It is a massive hoax, and they've gone to great lengths to deceive the people. I mean, think about it. We went to the moon in 1969, first landing. Okay, we haven't been back since. Why? Because we never went there to begin with, and they had to go to something else. They had to baffle us with something else. So they had this alleged ISS, this International Space Station. which recently one of the astronauts almost drowned in. Why did he almost drown? Because all of the video you're seeing of that space station is done in a large aquarium. And apparently his spacesuit leaked. And it's comical. In my book, I have a picture showing a scuba diver, a tank anyway, in the space station. There are many videos you can watch on YouTube which show bubbles from that are floating, that you can see them floating by while they're supposed to be in space. These are phony space films, and the depictions that are of the Earth are computer-generated imagery.
Well, yeah, you go through this, folks, and page after page. First of all, looking at the Apollo lunar landings, okay, and your expose of Grisham, how they were murdered. Grisham was going to blow the whistle on it. They were in that simulated craft, and they were murdered with the zero oxygen. The whole thing, I had no idea, and yet you put it all together, and there it is. You can document it in the end notes, the footnotes. You trace it back. The pictures, again, who digs deep? Who digs enough into this to show, okay, this is actually a hoax? Yeah, these beautiful pictures of the Google Earth, the mapping, the NASA photographs. You look at this and you've highlighted the cloud cover forming the three-letter word SEX. SEX. My goodness, that's quite a sexy storm, isn't it? Coming out.
Yeah.
Holy mackerel. How does that work? And then you diagram and document the scale model of these blue marbles, right? And then you look at the land masses. Well, you think they ought to do a better job of getting their land masses to fit, because each picture is different. The land masses are much different, smaller, bigger, misplaced. It doesn't add up.
Yep.
Doesn't add up.
Well, and add to that the fact that rockets don't work in a vacuum. They can't work. It's a physical impossibility for a rocket to propel a ship in the vacuum of space, which they allege they're in. It's just they don't work. They need a fulcrum to push against. Rockets work in the atmosphere here because there's a fulcrum of the atmosphere to push against. But without something to push against, rockets do not work in a vacuum.
Yeah, just these are common sense things that come on, really? Yeah, really, folks, absolutely. Where you've taken this picture of the word sex in the clouds, and you look at the angle in which it's positioned, the juxtaposition of it, that you have the Earth coming through on the pole at a 23.4 degree angle. Well, isn't it interesting, folks, that the tilt of the Earth where they put that sex picture, the clouds, for heaven's sakes, the 90-degree full angle of geometry, the geometer, the study of the Earth, the tilt at that point is exactly 66.6 degrees. Is that coincidence? 90 degrees minus 23.4 degree tilt, 66.6. Oh my goodness, that's just a coincidence, isn't it, Edward? Come on.
Yeah. And there's on so many levels the deception. In fact, I discussed in there the moon rocks. People say, well, of course we've got moon rocks. They've proven it. Well, actually, they gave a moon rock to a former prime minister of the Netherlands, and after he died, he willed the moon rock to the state, and it was put in the local museum, and then they tested it, and they found that it wasn't a moon rock. Now, how can they know whether it's a moon rock? Because they discovered that it was petrified. I'm pretty sure there aren't any trees on the moon. So, the moon rocks were pretty fake. The
There's
moon
a
rocks came direct from the Apollo 11.
yeah, yeah. In fact, it's funny you should mention that because here in Utah we have a planetarium that has star shows and all that. I go. It's in Salt Lake City, and one of their prized possession is this. They have it in a prism delta triangle pyramid, right? You go in and it's their most prized possession. It's a moon rock. Well, guess what? There was a front page news story in the local newspapers here about they're having to remodel and redo the planetarium, and so they have this Brinks truck with full. I mean, this is like a huge still, this priceless piece of NASA history. It's not the planetariums; it's just on loan from NASA, so they have to go through this prescribed protocol of absolutely keeping it out of the public. You know, they don't want this thing stolen. They have more security on this moon rock than they'd have at the National Archives with the Declaration of Independence. I mean, it was that incredibly. Really, it's just a rock. Probably, like you said,
Yeah.
probably if it was analyzed, it's probably petrified wood. Who knows? Who knows?
Yeah.
So I mean, we go on through this. You take a look also at the connections to NASA with Freemasonry, the connections to Freemasonry, and again going back to the Kabbalah and this tribe that really controls it all. Isn't it? Doesn't it just make your head itch a little bit?
Well, George Orwell, who was a communist, and he wrote 1984 to reveal the conspiracy, the world conspiracy, and the protagonist in the book is a guy named Winston Smith, and he's having a conversation with O'Brien, who is a Central Committee member, and O'Brien tells him that that our control over matter is absolute, and Winston Smith says, "What do you mean your control over matter? You can't control matter." He says, "Yes, we control matter because we control the mind." And his point is that if they can control what people think, they can actually control matter in that sense. So the Earth doesn't really spin at approximately 25,000 miles per hour at the equator, but people think it does. And so in that sense, they control matter. See, if this is mind control. This is mass mind control. And if they can control your mind about something like that, every other deception is child's play. 9/11 is child's play. Kennedy's assassination, child's play. The Lincoln assassination, it's child's play. All of those deceptions are much less in elaborate nature than the deception about the nature of God's creation.
Well said. Well said. Okay, listen, folks. I failed to mention in the first hour and this hour again. This station that you're listening to, Revolution Radio, this story behind the story show, we have no corporate sponsorship. We have no advertisements to go for. We have none of that. So we only survive. The station only survives by the largesse, the donations of you, the listening audience. If you want a copy of this show tonight to share with other people, please do so. Please support the archives at the very least. We also have a special thing now that any show that you would like, Story Behind the Story, or any other host for just $40, $35.95 or so, small nominal fee, you get a whole year of broadcast, a whole year, and on a CD to listen to. So these are there available. We have a couple of other rapidly coming to the close of time here, Edward, but we have a couple of questions in the chat room that have popped up. Let me bring those out and let's see your response to them. I answered one of them myself during the break, but let me just give your take on it. The question is it possible that the force of quote unquote Satan changed the fixed position of the Earth or the solar system in order to set up more favorable etheric conditions for chaos and war? What do you think about that idea?
No, I'm not. No. Satan was cast to the earth. Okay, he rebelled against God, and a third of the angels with him were cast to the earth. He's been given by God certain powers, and the book of Job explains that very well, because he gave Satan power to actually kill Job's family to make a point. Satan does only what God allows. And the Bible makes it clear that the earth cannot move. It's immovable. So no, Satan cannot move something that God says in his word is immovable. So the earth is completely without motion, as the Bible states, and so no, he did not and could not shift something that God has already indicated is immovable.
Yeah, I wrote back, my answer is basically along the same lines. The Earth's position has never changed. It's fixed, it's immovable, basically. But only here's what has changed. Our perceptions, the humanity's perception of reality has been changed to become perversely wrong, to basically embrace a lie. So as our perception of reality is wrong, we are thus mind controlled in a major way. And that, how can you be free? I mean, free to really get a relationship with spirituality, with the creator of the universe, if your mind is so completely warped so that you have that, like my friend in Israel. No, the Bible cannot possibly be true because, Joshua, the book of Joshua, there's no way that the sun can stop its motion. The earth would stop. The earth would stop. It'd be total chaos and disruption. See, that's the mindset. That's the mindset that's dangerous.
Yeah. And as you so ably pointed out, if it was the earth that stopped its motion, think about it. The earth is traveling at 1,000 miles per hour at the equator, probably 700 miles per hour in Israel, okay? At 700 miles per hour, okay, and the reason I say that so people understand, as you go further north, the circumference of the globe is reduced as you go further north, and therefore the speed from the apex of the spin is reduced as well. But in any event, if any object or any person were to stop at 700 miles per hour, come to a sudden stop, there would be a bloody mess on the earth. Nobody could survive that. I mean, you couldn't survive a car going 50 miles per hour coming to a sudden stop. You multiply that times 10, it would be carnage.
Indeed.
And just to give you another example, let's talk about that. So, according to Isaac Newton, gravity is based on the mass of the earth, okay, and that we are attracted to the earth simply by its mass. Okay, there's a gravitational force. That gravitational force keeps us in perfect equilibrium with the alleged spin. So at the equator, let's say a 170-pound man, okay, would weigh 170 pounds, or let's say 175, 175-pound man would weigh 175 pounds. But as he goes north, the spin becomes less. So as I said, as you come further north, at each latitude, the spin is not as fast, which means that the man who the centrifugal force pulling out on him becomes less, which means he becomes heavier by the force of gravity. Whereas, and pretty soon, if he gets within 100 feet of the North Pole, there would be a 4,000-fold reduction in the centrifugal force pulling out. Okay, because within 100 feet of the North Pole, you're going about a quarter of a mile per hour, which means that he would actually be weighing 700,000 pounds within 100 feet of the North Pole. And that's ridiculous. We know that that's not the case, okay, that people weigh virtually the same everywhere on the globe. So right there, it proves that the theory of gravity is a theory which is proven wrong.
Yeah, again, you're not supposed to ask these questions. You're just making people. Come on, this is not good thought process. You give me a headache there, Edward. But the book is full of these things, folks. You got to sit back and really objectively analyze. And I really like the first chapter. I've always thought this, but I had no. I didn't take the time to do what you did. On page 13, you have the formula to compute the distance of drop below the so-called horizon. Let's assume that NASA and the Kabbalists of Einstein and others are correct, that we are a spinning globe. Let's assume that. Okay, if that's the case, the radius of the Earth, that's from the pole to the center of the Earth, 3,963 miles. You got a circumference around of the whole Earth, 24,901 miles. Okay, so based on the curvature, let's give a benefit of the doubt. Let's say it's not really a pure circle. Let's say it's more of an elliptical circle. Okay, it's more like an egg-shaped thing. Let's give them a doubt. Let's say it's not a pure circle. Okay, but let's just go as the case may be. You do a geometrical. You put a compass and a square out there. You measure what's called the formula to measure the number of miles that it would take to have your line of sight or the horizon drop. It's simple science, folks. It's not really not rocket science. The number is this, and you got a really good chart here that documents this out. For instance, if you're 10 statute miles out on the ocean, okay, and you're looking at a point on the horizon 10 miles away, that would, based on the curvature of the Earth on water, which is a pure barometer of the curvature of the Earth, you would have a drop of 66 feet. That's 10 miles. I have a favorite place where I go at least twice a year. I get a vacation home up in North Idaho. It's called Lake Pend Oreille. Lake Pend Oreille, Idaho is a cool place because, it's a big lake, big body of water. It's 27 miles long and 7 miles wide at its widest point. I was just up there 3 weeks ago. I got to tell you, exactly, I have a really neat GPS fish finder on my boat, and I can tell exactly how many miles I am from point to point on the map. I just point on them. So at the middle of the lake, facing northward, there's a city on the shore there called Hope, Idaho. I'm sitting there. I'm exactly 14 and a half miles out in the middle of Lake Pend Oreille, and I take my really nice heavy-duty binoculars and my telephoto lens, and you know what? I can see the pier and the boats on dock 14 miles away. I saw that, and I commented, I says, no, wait a minute. How can that be based on these calculations? You see, that's the other thing. I mean, and you point this out in the book. There's a Samuel Robotham wrote a book on this, and it's 1881. It's called Zetetic Astronomy, Earth, not a globe. And you put pictures from his book, and folks, I've done. Hello, it doesn't fit. Doesn't fit. And that's, again, we said that at the top of the hour of the first show. Science is what you can see and witness and quantify. It's, you go 12 miles away, you need a binocular to see it. It's far away, so it's small. Okay, that's the horizon. But with high-powered binoculars and a spotting scope, you can see the docks. They're not elevated. They're on the water. How can you explain that, Edward?
Well, the only way to explain it, you know that water is seeks its own level.
Yes.
It is level, and therefore, when you're looking across the water, the only way that you could see the 14 miles that you saw was if the Earth were flat. I mean, you can't see that on a globe. You could not see that distance. It would be below the horizon because, and it's very simple to calculate. I put the calculations in the book. People can do their own calculations, make their own observations. I give a number of examples. The famous photograph from Joshua Nowicki from 57 miles away of the Chicago skyline, where the entire city of Chicago should be below the horizon from 57 miles away, but the entire city skyline can be seen from across Lake Michigan.
Exactly.
And
exactly. I sit there. So, my pilot friend that came over and visited me when I was sick or not sick, recuperating from my surgery. I talked to him about he was commercial air pilot for 10 to 15 years. He flies and maintains jets at Hill Air Force Base. And I said to him, come on, what do you think about this? And I showed it to him. He goes, I've always known it true, but I just can't advocate or promote it because of the throwback, the lashing back on it. And so I just kind of give the attitude, well, so what? I know what I know. It is what it is. And if people want to believe a lie, well, what harm is that? So we transformed from physical reality to a philosophical discussion, going back. And my friend's a good Christian man. And I said, could it be that this is the problem with the world today? That people aren't observing, and they're so quietly acquiescing to the lie that nothing ever changes. How can we expect this world to get back to harmony and peace and love if there's such a lie being promoted and people have flat out written God out of the equation? He said that's...
what you just said is very poignant, and you're absolutely correct. But if there is an enlightening, if people do realize the true nature of God's creation, then there will be a change for the better.
That's our mission, Edward Hendrie. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule.
Well, thank you for having me.
Let's have you back in the near future, my friend. Have a great weekend, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be back next week. This is